I would now like to welcome our next speaker for today to the floor, Deepak Rajmohan, the founder and CEO of Green Pod Labs, an agri-tech startup developing active packaging to minimize food waste and losses. Deepak also has a master's in food science from Oklahoma State University and more than 7 years experience in the food, biotech, and agricultural fields. Today, Deepak is going to be speaking on the topic of emerging technologies around supply chain optimization. Deepak, a distinct pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Franco. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you so much. Thanks again for the opportunity. Great to be here. It was wonderful to listen to other speakers as well. So today's topic, what I'm going to cover is on the emerging technologies and fresh produce supply chain optimization. So I just wanted to put a pause and then give the current challenges within the fresh produce supply chain, and then look at how the emerging technologies can minimize those challenges. So looking at major problems right now, one of the biggest challenges both in developing country and developed country is like right now fresh produce are traveling for about 500 to 1,500 kilometers from farm to consumer. I mean, on average, the fresh produce, half of its shelf life is spent on transport and storage, which is a huge concern for retaining the quality and retaining the shelf life. The other side of it is like the supply chain of fresh produce is very sensitive to weather changes, and that's in particular in developing countries that's been a huge problem. Countries like India, when there's rainy seasons, the fresh produce pricing gets dynamic and gets higher. And the supply is also very much disrupted. Currently, there's a poor visibility and transparency in the overall fresh produce supply chain right now. So the data is not transmitted from one part to the other. There's been a lot of inconsistent data capture and data putting it on one platform as well. That's been a major concern in developing countries, and in developed countries, there are few technologies worth addressing right now. Supply and demand forecasting has been a huge challenge as well, and that is causing us more losses and more challenges on the way. There's no proper fresh produce quality and safety standards right now, and that's also becoming more dynamic along the way. There's a lack of supply chain infrastructure and packaging solutions in major developing countries. So these are several challenges which is like currently in supply chain, and how emerging technologies are addressing this supply chain is very critical. So these supply chain challenges are contributing to about 33% globally. About 33% of fruits and vegetables is lost before it reaches the consumer, and overall food waste is accounted for about $1.3 trillion economic waste, and food waste in general contributes for about 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. These are massive challenges and has to be addressed. So it's not going to be one solution which is going to solve this magnitude of problem. We need to look at multiple technologies and solutions to tackle this problem, and that's where the emerging technologies right now would play a huge role to address all the challenges in the supply chain and eventually minimize the food wastage and food loss. I've looked at a couple of technologies which are very promising and which could disrupt the overall supply chain of fresh produce. One such technology, what we are building at Green Pod Labs, is biotechnology-based packaging to extend the shelf life of fruits and vegetables. Apart from that, there are technologies like robots and automation to optimize the overall supply chain. AI, machine learning, and data analytics have been a huge boost in terms of like optimizing the supply chain. And other technologies like blockchain and Internet of Things have been also playing a critical role in this optimization. We'll go deeper into each of these technologies to understand how these technologies are currently adding value and how this could be a future value for the supply chain as well. To start off with robots and process optimization, right? So currently there's been a huge influx in funding and research in terms of robotics to optimize and automate fruits and vegetables grading and sorting. And several robotics have been deployed in terms of like fresh produce packing as well. There's one company, the human robot. I'm just going to play their video. They're building these like robotic arm to help automate and automate the overall fresh produce packaging. This could minimize the errors and the human interaction with the fresh produce. This is going to be huge in terms of like accelerating the farm to fork supply chain and automating that more. And on the other hand, there's been a lot of technologies around the fresh produce sorting and grading. There's one company who is working on this technology. Technologies like these would help us like price the produce better based on the quality and based on the customer who wants a particular quality. And that makes it more flexible in terms of like minimizing the losses. Autonomous vehicles within the warehouse has also been a huge inflow into the fresh produce. The autonomous vehicle, when they come into warehouses, can minimize any damage in terms of like handling the fresh produce in hard way, and minimize the touch points within the fresh produce as well. I think I'm able to hear some noise. Organizers, would it be possible to mute other speakers?
I believe everyone's muted, Deepak.
Sure. Thank you.
Continue.
Thanks. So the other key technology, which is very much emerging and it's disrupting the overall fresh produce supply chain, is like use of AI, machine learning, and data analytics. One key area within this spectrum is like dynamic pricing. So there's been a lot of changes in the overall supply chain, and there are known and unknown factors. And dynamic pricing is one way of like minimizing the losses. And using different parameters like product quality and also like the demand and forecast, supply and demand forecasting, and based on that, planning our overall production and pricing the product based on that is also very critical. The other area where AI and machine learning and data analytics have been playing a huge role is in terms of like supply chain route optimization. Within point A to point B, use of like AI and machine learning. There are several companies working on like optimizing the supply chain and then giving the best route to minimize any spoilage or temperature differences along the way. The technology, what is closer to what we're working on is biotechnology to extend the shelf life of fruits and vegetables, which is a key factor when handling fresh produce. Even though there's like a lot of optimization what we can do, but there's a limitation over what you can approach. So invariably, you have to extend the shelf life of fruits and vegetables to minimize the wastage and losses. So what we are doing at Greenpod Labs is like we're developing sachets. These are like small sugar packets like products, which can extend the shelf life by slowing down the ripening rate and minimizing microbial growth as well. There are several other companies working on edible coating and edible wax to minimize the moisture loss and minimizing oxidation. And there are also technologies like biosensors to monitor and control fresh produce spoilage during transport and storage. Blockchain has been another area where there's a lot of innovation going on. So one use case which is very interesting is like building digital supply chain twin, where the physical supply chain touch points and various qualities is being mapped into a digital supply chain mapping. and then that helps you like track all the data points and also simulate a potential worst case scenario and how you can replicate that situation in real life. Use of blockchain and tracking all the data gives you like more transparency and traceability across different value chains, and also that provides the right security and provides the right accurate information for the end consumers. On the other hand, this also helps you track food safety, and as one of the other speaker also mentioned, product recalls have been a huge problem. And if you use blockchain and technologies like that to track the data from farm until it reaches the consumer, it's easy to track back and find any of these challenges, and then minimize any product recalls as well. The last technology what I wanted to discuss was Internet of Things. There's been a lot of inflow in terms of like use of sensors to measure quality and freshness of fruits and vegetables, and that gives you the right data to sell the produce on a certain time. So that's the biggest missing link right now, to sell the fresh produce and also process it or store it for a longer period. Use of these sensors in terms of like also grading has been a huge progress. And then there are other sensors and technologies to monitor temperature and humidity during cold storage and cold supply chain. And that also gives you a real-time alert and provide you all the measures what you can take to minimize the losses and wastage. So those are the pointers what I had. So you can reach me at Deepak at Greenpond Labs, and my company website is like greenpondlabs.com. Really appreciate for the time and thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepak. The pleasure is ours entirely. A reminder for all of our viewers who might have specific questions for Deepak or any of our other speakers for today, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We'll try and address as many as possible during the Q&A and panel discussion later today. So thank you, Deepak.